Can you tell me what your diet was like growing up?
My diet growing up was probably a pretty typical like Canadian and American diet. It had a little bit of everything. You know, my parents made me eat my vegetables, but we also ate we ate a lot of meat and dairy. We ate a lot of chicken fingers and hot dogs too. So it's just quite a mix.
Yeah. Did you have favorite meals?
Oh, craft dinner and hot dogs.
Yeah.
That was my go-to. Like if I ever had a final dinner, honestly, that's still what it would probably be. So.
And then did it shift at all as you got into like your teen years?
No, just increased in quantity dramatically.
Yeah, you were like, it's time to eat.
Yeah, I was a big eater when I was a teenager for sure, but I didn't shift a lot. I think when I was a kid, I probably had a little bit more candy and a little bit less candy when I was a teenager, and I used to drink just gratuitous amounts of milk, like a liter of milk a day.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Did you really like milk?
Yeah, I don't know, I would crave it.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would just drink glasses of it constantly.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it was just easy calories, and I just couldn't get enough of them.
Mm-hmm. And so when you transition to university, like often that's kind of like the first time like living on your own, or you're eating a lot of on-campus food. And so I'd be curious any changes or thought that went into your diet at that point?
Well, I actually never lived on campus, so I didn't have that experience of just having like the campus food all the time. So and I know some people would gain weight during that period, but I was off campus from the beginning, and so I feel like I kept a pretty similar mixture, honestly. Like I intentionally would make stir fries and stuff with vegetables because I knew I needed some vegetables, but then I would also indulge in a lot of French fries and unhealthy stuff too. So it was kind of a mix, and I wasn't I was probably that. Kind of like middle healthy, like not too bad, but could use improvement.
Yeah. And so when was the first time you started wanting to like intentionally change your diet?
Honestly, I never really wanted to do anything about changing my diet until, I would say, my adult years, around late 20s, and I started just thinking about a little bit more about my diet in relationship to climate change. And when I looked at the data, I was looking at a couple studies that were doing budgets on where the most of your greenhouse gas emissions come from. And I looked at that and saw that beef plays an outsized role in that. If you just cut beef and lamb, but I didn't eat lamb, out of your diet, it makes a pretty substantial decrease in your greenhouse gas emissions. And I was like, wow. I don't like beef that much. It wasn't the hardest thing for me to cut out. And I was like, if I can cut like my diet carbon budget in half by just removing that, I'm like, that's fine.
Yeah.
So, I made the choice to do that quite a long time ago. And it wasn't too difficult. I mean, any time you're in a situation where it would be normal to eat a hamburger or something like that, there's usually alternatives. So, it wasn't too bad.
Mm-hmm. And so, and so you found that transition to like reducing your beef intake, correlating it to your environmental values, and you also found that transition wasn't too hard for you.
No, it wasn't, because there's lots of I think myself included and lots of other people, diet isn't just about nutrition. You also use it as a source of happiness, especially when times are tough. And when I'm like overworked and stuff like that, looking forward to a really delicious meal it can help get you through some tough times. But there was lots of indulgent things that I could consume that just didn't have beef in them. So it wasn't hard to find lots of other things. I used to eat a lot of chicken wings.
Mm-hmm. Did you feel like your life do you feel like you liked your diet less after you cut out beef?
No, actually, it didn't really make any difference, honestly. Yeah.
And so after that decision, it sounds like you were there for a while.
Mm-hmm. Quite a number of years, yeah.
Quite a number of years. And so then, since then, how have you kind of considered and changed your diet?
So after that, it kind of stayed the same for a long time. And then it was actually not until I met you. And I remember we were having a conversation. You asked a question. And I liked the question because it was very... it was a curious question. I didn't feel judged by it, but like I feel like in some sense it made me ask myself a tough question. And the way you worded it was something like, "Oh, you seem to really care about climate change. I'm just wondering why you haven't brought your like diet fully in line with your values."
That sounds a little intense.
It was a little intense, but it was, I feel like it was said in such a way where I was just like, because I could have said, well, I did look at it and this is good enough. And honestly, like that wouldn't have been the craziest position, but I knew that, going from beef to no beef was a big jump. And then going from what my current diet was to vegan was like not as big as no beef, but still substantial. And I also was like, well, I'm getting a little bit older, and a lot of the ways that I liked to eat meat were, I think, probably unhealthy. Like in particular, when you like deep fried chicken wings covered in sugary sauce, nobody's saying like, oh yeah, good health food, right? And so like there's a lot of the things that I did consume probably weren't the healthiest. So it was a way for me to remove, and like highly processed foods like chicken fingers and stuff like that. Like that was one of my go-tos. So it was a way for me to cut out some of the unhealthy parts of my diet. And like when I went vegan, without trying to, I lost almost all my like excess fat. Like I was never big to begin with, but I was like, had a little bit of extra, and without trying to do anything substantial, like I was still, I would still have treats and I would still do stuff like that, but I did just like shed any extra weight that I had, within a handful of months. So it was, but sorry, going back to the original conversation, you asked me that, and I sort of took it on and being like, okay, like I'm going to ask myself this question. And then I did a little bit more research and tried to get honest with myself about like, okay, is this something, that you're doing because, you like this person and you want them to like you, or is this something that you would do if they disappeared tomorrow? And so when I asked myself to try to get honest about that, but I was like, well, I think I can do this. I think there's enough. There's a way that I can change my diet where I'll still be happy and satisfied with what I eat, and then also, there's these other kind of benefits as well. With regards to when you do a whole foods plant diet, which I do like 50 to 60% of, there's like quite a bit of good health benefit there. And so it did seem like a way to kind of like do that as I'm getting older. I want to stay mobile. I want to stay active into my later years. So it seemed like it was also a way to do that and save a little bit of money. I mean, beans are just dirt cheap.
They're so cheap.
And I'm a frugal person, and so that's actually a big win for me. If I can eat for a little bit cheaper, it's a big deal. So. Yeah, when I kind of looked at all the angles and thought about would I keep doing this if on my own, and once I came to the conclusion of yes, then I've sort of never looked back. I was just I made a sort of a plan to eat the rest of the meat that I had in the house, and then and that was it.
Were there moments where you like, oh, like, does this fit after you made that transition, or once you made the transition, do you feel like you were good from there?
The only other thing was there's like because, the big picture stuff where just like, oh, I'm just going to generally cut out meat. But there is sort of this issue that I might call decision fatigue that comes up with something like this, where you have a self-imposed rule, and in the center of the self-imposed rule, it's really easy, right? You go somewhere, there's a meat option, there's a vegan option, I pick the vegan option, right? Those are easy. But what if you're at somebody's place and they have a snack out and you're not really sure if it's vegan? Yeah. There's situations like that where I think the last 1% of trying to cut out all that little stuff can be very socially expensive. A part of what concerns people about like making that switch is that those little things, that last 1%. And if that last 1% is going to be very socially expensive, it's going to cause you to have these really uncomfortable social interactions that honestly don't even matter. Mm-hmm. If you're coming at it from the climate angle like I do, it doesn't matter if you're 99% vegan or 100% vegan. The difference between those two things is like nothing. Yeah. So like, just don't sweat the little stuff. Like if you make the big change and you're making those changes like en masse on your diet, those last little things are just, like whenever I go to buy a bag of chips at the grocery store, I'll check to see if there's any, because sometimes there's milk powder on them. So like I'll do that. But if I'm at somebody's house and they have some chips out, I just eat them. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like.
And to this point, like from a societal perspective, I think it is meaningful to say, like, oh, like, I choose to not eat beef or meat because of the environmental impact. And, like, you know, you also have very understanding friends and family who are happy to go along with that. But is this kind of like these very small percentages where it's like, for you, that's just not worth that time and energy?
No. And like, because there's even things like, you know, somebody will be barbecuing and then they'll throw on a veggie burger for me, which I super appreciate. And, you know, and then they'll be like, oh, like, do you want me to use extra tongs? Like, sorry, I touched it. And I'm just like, no, don't worry about that, man. Like,
That's so much work.
Yeah, like, I feel like that little nitpicky stuff is kind of where, like, the reality is. I mean, there's a bit of a social, or what's the word? A stereotype. There's a stereotype about vegans being kind of mean and rude about this sort of thing. And I think it comes from people doing what they've always done and, you know, doing their best to accommodate you. Be like, oh, like, you don't want a regular burger, throw on a veggie burger, there you go. And then getting sort of like made to feel bad about not doing enough. And they're just like, well, geez, like, you know, this is kind of a lot. And I think that's, I don't think that's good for like social cohesion, for maintaining relationships, for all that stuff. And I just really don't see the value in that last little bit of fussiness.
And so on kind of that social side of it, like, how has it been transitioning socially? And so to this point of being like, you know, a 99% vegan or however you want to say it, like, how have those relationships been?
It's been fine. I mean, honestly, and I think because like at the very beginning of it, when you're like, I was talking about decision fatigue, because you are just like, oh, like, you know, there's these little things like what about honey? What about this? What about that? And so like at the edges of like what you might call a vegan diet, there's all these like little decisions to make. And I think at the beginning I was like a little bit like, okay, like, what do I do here? And like, you have to sort of like make a decision around them. And then at some point along the line, I was just like, this is becoming a chore. You know what I mean? It's one thing to just like learn some new recipes, which is, you know, as soon as you learn like a dozen new recipes, like, you're off to the races. Now you have 12 things that, you know, you like, and you get a bunch of different variety and stuff like that. And so it's not like, that part wasn't bad at all. But it was this, like, you know, fussing about these little things was taking like a disproportionate amount of energy for, you know, whatever. And so I feel like when I got over that hump, and started being like, you know what, I'm not going to worry about the last 1%. That made everything super easy. And it also made, because there's sometimes too, like, you know, you have friends you've had for a long time and you've related to each other, and then, you know, they're going to make you some food and they're like, oh, is this okay? Is this okay? And then for me to be like, hey, like, it's all good, man. Like, don't fuss about that last little bit of stuff. Like, it's, you know, I just want to be here with you. I just want to hang out with you. That, you know, that made it easy. And so I think that, you know, for me, being able to just like not worry about that last 1%, and then so that you can still, you know, pay attention to honestly, like, whenever you're with people and you're with people who are, you know, close friends and you've been friends with for a long time, the point of being with them and eating with them is to, you're building your relationship with them. And so like staying focused on that is like, that's the important thing that you're doing when you're hanging out with them. And to not let the change that I make in my diet for like my own reasons, which are all mine, not letting that kind of get in the way of me being present in those in my friendships was like, I think, in my perspective, a very good decision that I'm very glad that I made, because I was very I really didn't want that to be like a thing that caused controversy or anything. And honestly, like there's a bit of a stereotype, right, about like, oh, you get these like manly guys that eat a lot of meat. And like, you know, I get little nudges and jokes or whatever about being a soy boy, but it's like, it's all, and I feel like it's funny, it's in jest, and those same people, they went out of their way to make sure that I have stuff to eat when I go to their place. So, you know, it hasn't really been a big social challenge. In terms of like, I was never super tied to the idea of being a super masculine guy. Mm-hmm. I've always been like a little bit smaller, and so like I think my identity's never been tied to being that. So it wasn't as much of a transition for me. And now if somebody did have an identity of being like a big, strong, tough guy, like maybe that would be tougher for them. I don't know, but it wasn't for me.
That's interesting to hear you talk with like veganism and masculinity, and like, because I think there is To this point, I think the people who are like, oh, I love meat, meat's a part of my identity, I think that's most often been by a
I think
long
it's probably
shot.
fair. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's interesting to hear you say that, and also for you that like that hasn't really been an issue, and that also even the people in your life who are more like that are very accepting. So now looking at your diet, like you're I think a couple years into eating this way. Do you feel like you found a good like pace with it? Do you feel like you're at a good point with how you eat?
Yeah, no, I feel quite good about my diet and how I eat now. Whenever I first went vegan, like I said, I lost a little bit of weight and I like shed a little bit of extra fat, but that's stabilized. And now I feel quite good about I feel quite good about how I feel and where I'm at with my diet. It's easy now too. Now that I've like, there's a little bit of a transition in the beginning, like learning to cook different things, but as soon as you, like I say, it's like a dozen recipes. As soon as you get a dozen recipes under your belt, it's pretty easy sailing.
If someone's interested in reducing their animal consumption intake for the environment, is there any thoughts or advice or like resources that you found helpful?
Yeah, well, I mean, I got a science background, and so I always think about the data. If you're doing it for the environment, I would say like there's pretty good budgets, carbon budgets, looking at animal agriculture, and not all meat is the same. So I would say look at those and make decisions that are going to have the biggest impact from a climate perspective, but the smallest impact on your life. And so like, I look at the math and sort of let the math guide you. What is it, if I wanted to say, reduce the amount of emissions in my diet by some percentage, and I say, where's the biggest bang for my buck? And I think that's sort of because there's not a lot of point in asking people to make a sacrifice that's really like important to them if it doesn't even do much, right? Like if you're gonna take something out that's for the collective good, look for the low-hanging fruit. And for me, the low-hanging fruit was beef. But for other people, it might be something else. And I know that there's been some people who say, like, oh, beef's really important to them in terms of a food that they have once in a while. And, they've kind of shifted of it from it being a everyday thing to maybe being a thing they have on holidays, where it's like it's important enough to them that they want to have it in sometimes, but less often. And so there's, everybody's diet is their own choice. I'm a big believer, and I don't want to push my food beliefs in particular, because food's kind of a very emotionally important thing, on telling people what to do. But if people are interested in modifying their diet based on climate reasons, which is, I think it's a useful thing to do. It does contribute quite a bit to our greenhouse gas emissions. That's the reality. And so if you're interested in saying, well, maybe I should reduce my emissions a little bit. We're in a pretty high emitting per person country, and is there things that I could do that would be a pretty small lift for me that would have a big impact? Look at the numbers, and there's some pretty easy to understand diagrams that kind of summarize what the carbon budget show, and have a peek at those and see what you could change that would have a big impact and wouldn't be too big of a sacrifice.
For you, where you are now, is there parts of it that still feel like a sacrifice, or do you feel like you found kind of substitutions for things that you used to like?
Yeah, I've found substitutions now, so I have my own like little treats that occupy those old lanes. Like I've gotten really into grilled cheese sandwiches lately.
Yeah.
Because there was a point back in the time where vegan substituted cheeses, I don't think were very good, to be frank. That has changed in the past. I don't know when it changed, but I discovered it recently. That now they make vegan cheese, which is, it's just like oil and potato starch and like, packed into a little thing. So, and salt, obviously. So they make it so it's like pretty good now. And especially like when you're thinking grilled cheese, you're thinking processed cheese anyways. Well, processed cheese is kind of processed cheese. Like it's a lot easier to mimic processed cheese than it is to mimic real cheese in some sense. And so I think that's been a really good like comfort food for me. And I have other stuff as well, but that's been my latest kick.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything that you would go back and say to yourself when you were transitioning to veganism that you like wish you knew or that would have helped you at that time?
I think I would have said off the beginning, like, focus on the big picture items and don't sweat the little stuff.
Yeah.
Just, you can go down a rabbit hole and you can fuss about things, especially like, I'm a little bit obsessive. I get obsessive about things. And I know if I get onto something, that I'll think about it a lot. And, but you can go down the rabbit hole and waste a bunch of mental energy. But if you step back, look at the big picture, what really matters, make those decisions. There's a lot of people have a lot of big stressors in their lives. They're raising children. They're worried about their career. They're worried about the economy. They're worried about, increasing global conflicts. There's a lot of stuff going on. And so, they can't have these decisions in the personal life take up a huge amount of their mental burden. They just don't have it. So like, just if you're looking to change your diet, there's some easy wins. So stick to the big picture stuff and don't sweat the small stuff.
What is your favorite food now?
Yeah, I would have to say grilled cheese sandwiches.
And the grilled cheeses are really
Yeah,
carrying
that's
you.
what's doing it right now. Yeah, and so that might change in a few months, but yeah, it's definitely hitting the spot.
Amazing. Well, thanks so much for chatting about this today. I think I really appreciate hearing from your perspective.
Absolutely. Thanks, Allison.